This time on Mystic Britain,
Are you a fan of human sacrifice?
I don't practice it myself.
Mary-Ann and I enter the murky world of Iron Age human sacrifice.
My, what a big knife that is, Katie.
Yes.
Using our razor-sharp investigative skills.
This is a human body, obviously. I spotted that straight away.
We'll be searching high and low.
You could go down first, just to check that it's big enough for me to get down.
And competing in an Iron Age cook-off.
It's going to be the best thing before sliced bread.
And Mary-Ann comes to a shocking conclusion.
I don't know why everyone's so against it.
What, human sacrifice?
Yeah, why not?
You're looking at me with a rather evil eye there.
Human sacrifice. A brutal practice from ancient Asia, the Pacific, South America.
And Dorset.
According to Mary-Ann, in the Iron Age, this part of Britain was a hot spot for human sacrifice. Now we have some peculiar customs, like Morris dancing and cheese rolling. But ritually killing people just doesn't seem very, well, British. So what was going on in Iron Age Britain? To find out, Mary-Ann has dispatched me to one of the great centres of Iron Age civilization, Maiden Castle, Britain's largest Iron Age hill fort. If I can actually find it.
Do I go right or left? Let's try left.
I'm no expert, but this doesn't look much like a castle or even a fort. Perhaps their strategy was to exhaust attackers with a steep climb, or just get them thoroughly lost. If that's the case, it's certainly working on me.
I don't know which way to go. Some people seem to go right.
What I need is a different perspective. Okay, now that is impressive. A titanic fortress hewn from a natural hill by the hands of Iron Age Britons. What it lacks in battlements and stone walls, it makes up for in size, and in the size of these great big ditches, the protective ditches that stop people attacking up here, I suppose. A series of man-made banks and troughs up to 6 meters high defend a vast enclosure at the very top of the hill. Well, it is an enormous area up here. The sign down below says this is the size of 50 football pitches, and you could get at least that number of games up here. So what did people do up here? How did they live? And can it shed any light on whether Iron Age Britons practiced human sacrifice? What I need is an archaeologist. And what do you know?
Hello, Neil.
Hello, Clive.
Good to see you. Now, you're a great expert.
Well,
This
so they
place.
say,
Yeah.
yes.
So how many people would have occupied this site?
Intensive production of grain. So wheat and barley, you know, there's huge quantities of that being grown in the fields around here. And that would be probably the main food stuff.
When it was excavated, archaeologists penned a handy sketch of the find. It shows the body buried in a very odd position.
He's sitting in there. That's significant, is it? He's sitting rather than lying down?
I think he's
or standing?
arranged. I think it's a funny kind of arrangement. It's not something that we see very often.
It's plausible, I suppose, but speaking as a lawyer, the evidence is highly circumstantial. And I've got an equally plausible explanation.
He was there at this time of the year. The wind was blowing as it's getting up now. He just died of cold.
The evidence here is as thin as my coat. And I need to get off this exposed hillside before I become another mysterious Maiden Castle body. I have to say, I'm not yet convinced. Mary-Ann?
Ah, but there's more, Clive. It literally turns to ash. So if you weren't burned, what happened to you?
The archaeologists reckon that you were probably excarnated, which is where the body is left out in the open air, and then your flesh rots away or it's picked clean by birds and animals, and then your bones may be collected up, but more likely they're just left to scatter to the four winds. There will be no archaeological evidence.
These represent the more than 2,000. The basic idea seems brutally simple. To get something, like enough food to avoid starvation, you have to give something. And the gift of choice seems to have been a human life. But there's something about this whole argument that still doesn't quite add up for me.
I can well imagine that Iron Age people did do rituals and had special practices in the fields to protect them, and the evidence just simply hasn't survived archaeologically. But what I don't understand is why is there such a ritual focus on the grain pits, where the storage is? Because surely by that point, the grain is safe.
As I can't ask an Iron Age farmer directly, I've come to talk to his modern equivalent, grain farmer Adrian Dixon, to see if he can shed some light on this.
Here is a crop of harvested wheat.
So this is going to turn into flour to make bread and cake and stuff like that? Can I pick some up?
By all means,
It smells absolutely amazing.
It turns out that keeping the grain in good condition is as hard today as it was 2,000 years ago.
The farmer's worst enemy is the weather, and if it's wet, you've got to dry it quickly, get the moisture out of it, because if you were to put this in here wet and not aerated, it would, within 24 hours, it would heat up, literally get red hot. It is a living entity, and you've got to put it into a state of dormancy and preserve it.
To pull that off, Adrian's grain store is packed with modern technology.
So this barn is designed to blow warm air through the grain so it doesn't get all soggy and start fermenting, rotting.
Correct, absolutely. This particular design, it's a ventilated floor, big fans, air will trickle up through the crop, cool it slowly, but as long as you've got airflow moving through it, even though it's a gradual process, it won't deteriorate.
Imagine what a challenge it would have been for Iron Age farmers. The grain pits were their equivalent of Adrian's technology, cool, dark and carved into the rock. And it seems to have worked pretty well. But bear in mind the survival of your entire community depended on it. And in that situation, I guess sacrificing someone to avoid starvation wouldn't have seemed quite so crazy.
And I'm assuming you don't make human or animal sacrifices to the gods to ensure your bountiful harvest?
We don't, no. But we may start trying to do that if things go seriously wrong.
I don't think I'd appreciated how many different ways storing grain can go wrong. Planting and harvesting it is just the start. If you want to have seed corn that's good enough to grow the following year so you've got something to eat, you need to work really hard. It makes total sense to me now that the place where you really want to appease those gods is where you store your grain.
OK, it's starting to look more and more like Marianne was right. Sacrificing humans may have been a great British pastime 2,500 years ago. We have bodies, we have method, we have a motive of sorts. But it's all brutal and rather extreme. Were Iron Age Britons really so desperate? I'd like to get a sense of what their life was like that doesn't involve tiny plastic men. Arrgh. Jackie Wood is an experimental archaeologist and writer who spends her time working out how our ancient ancestors lived.
I'll settle down next to you if I may.
Right.
And no civilized person should have bread without butter. But just like everything else in the Iron Age, making it takes time and effort, and just how central grain was to their lives. After quite literally hours of slaving over a hot fire, hands up, I'm talking about Jackie there, not me, I'm more than ready to see if this meal was really worth sacrificing a human life form.
Right, so these rolls, as we've made them, are they ready, do you think?
They're ready.
Yes.
Let's go for it.
Smells like bread. I'll put half of it down. Oh, and this is the
Some
butter we've
butter.
made. I think I might... OK. There we are. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So it's not the most elegant bread roll I've ever made. So we have a go at it?
Yeah.
Mmm.
That's good, isn't it?
Tastes almost like bread and butter.
Well, that trip back in time has taught me something absolutely vital. Don't give up the day job. What is obvious is that grain was a very big deal in the Iron Age. It was their staple food. If a crop failed, they faced starvation. So I can see in those circumstances that securing the seed grain is a powerful motive to do whatever you thought would keep the gods happy. Marianne may have been right all along.
It's funny, isn't it? Because you look at these vast hills that have been shaped and modified by human hands.
Yeah.
And possibly what they were all about was the control of tiny little barley grains and wheat grains. I mean, it's about control of resources. It's about making sure that the people are fed.
But what led people to believe that human sacrifice might in any way help?
Your guess is as good as mine, is as good as any experts, because there you're kind of delving into the, you know, the human heart. Why do we do any of the weird things that humans do? You know, beseech the gods to look after us. I know what we'll do is we'll sacrifice a human because a human life is very special and important.
Yeah.
Now, that might be partly that our modern sensibilities say human lives are very special and important, but actually back in the Iron Age, maybe it's not as valuable. And the truth is, we just don't know because the archaeology can't preserve people's intentions.
So, case solved then. Iron Age Britons did practice human sacrifice, and it was all about farming and avoiding famine. Wouldn't it be nice if it were that simple? But it never is. 20 years ago, evidence of ancient human sacrifice turned up not in a grain pit, but in a Gloucestershire cave.
So this is a cave. It just doesn't look like caving country.
No, well, this is solid limestone we're on. It's actually flat.
Yes.
And they're not caves like, you know, you walk into. They're formed as underground caverns underneath the limestone here.
Archaeologist Mark Horton has been visiting the site for nearly 2 decades.
Okay, you down?
Yeah, I'm down.
Good sound?
To get much deeper than this. Oh, right.
Okay, so
Oh, this is a proper cave entrance.
There is the entrance.
Yeah.
So we can send you down if you want.
Well, actually, I don't want. In fact, I'm struggling to think of anything I want less.
Well, don't take this unkindly. Is there a way you could go down first, just to check that it's big enough for me to get down?
Well, it is a little narrow in places.
Well, you wouldn't want to go down there, would you?
Yeah, that's what they all do.
Oh, for goodness sake. Mark, the thing is, as the years go by,
Yes.
are there some holes you can get in and out of? Is it more difficult? More difficult now?
Well, yes, it is. I mean, I was there 4 years ago and I went straight in and out.
Yes.
It was a little bit more difficult this time.
Age and pies, the Achilles heel of great archaeologists. And, of course, TV presenters.
So was this cave discovered by a professional archaeologist or an explorer, or did the people just stumble on it?
I was actually at the university, rung up by the police. So these nutters have come in with bags of bones that they've been clearing out of this cave.
Yeah.
So I went along to the police station. They had all these bones laid out. I said, well, they're probably ancient. So they're probably an archaeological deposit. So I just took them home, got in touch with the cavers, who said, oh, we're clearing the cave out.
Yeah.
And so every Friday night, I'd have a bag with skulls left on my doorstep.
What really caught Mark's attention, other than finding a carrier bag full of bones on his doorstep, was that a large number were human, and he found signs of violent death.
How many? What's the sort of quantity of bones you've got?
Well, we've got several thousand of them, and we think we've got at least 12 individuals.
Right.
Humans.
So would these have come here over a period of time, over dozens of years, hundreds of years, or what?
Well, we've radiocarbon dated quite a lot of the bones already, and every single one of them turns out to have exactly the same date. It took place over a very short period of time, and maybe one single moment. It might have just all happened in a day.
So one single event when there's some ceremony or some event, people dying, people being sacrificed. What's the picture I've got of this?
That's kind of what might be happening. There might have been some massive event in which people were being sacrificed and their carcasses were being thrown down as offerings to the gods.
Mass sacrifice. Now, that is very different to everything we've seen so far from the Iron Age. What could possibly have motivated this? The carbon dating places the bones around 2,000 years ago, which is a significant period in British history. It marks the start of the Roman invasion of Britain. Is it possible these human offerings were a desperate attempt to defeat the invaders? And Mark's got even more chilling evidence. This wasn't just mass human sacrifice. It was, and I can't believe I'm saying this, even more horrific. He believes the locals decided to supercharge their human sacrifice. And Mark's brought me to a nearby backyard to show me the proof.
Can I touch it?
Or is that... lift it out really carefully.
So even I can recognise what we're dealing with here.
That's the human skull.
And what's this bit?
And
There's another bit of the same...
a bit more of the cranium. So if we put
the same skull?
Yeah, so if we turn it up very carefully like this. And the key thing is, it's not just an ordinary skull.
No.
But the poor person's had a rather grisly end. As you can see that it's been broken.
Yes.
We've hit the point of impact is somewhere around the side here.
Right.
And these are the fracture marks from when somebody was literally poleaxed.
And you can tell that happened before they died? It's not just something they've cracked as the years have gone by?
No. This happened at the point of death. This is the trauma to the skull.
So we're talking about murder, are we?
This is somebody who is actually being sacrificed.
Sacrifice. And are you saying this is just the one down there, or dozens, hundreds of these skulls?
Well, we can't obviously tell because the bones are all mixed up, and so you can't necessarily work out the point of death of every single bone. But the fact that we've got somebody here who has clearly been murdered or sacrificed.
Yes.
And just when you thought it couldn't get worse than a grisly mass sacrifice, it does.
This is a human leg bone, femur, and it's been split longitudinally.
Okay.
Now, what you normally find with bones when they break across the bone rather than along it. And so somebody has literally had to do this.
Right.
It's a mechanical action.
Why have they done this then?
Well, the obvious answer is to extract the marrow.
Oh, right. Oh, yes, it's just like a bone you might give your dog.
That's right.
Yeah.
And in the middle, there is the marrow. So the way to extract the marrow is to split it with a chisel or something like that into two halves, and then you have the marrow.
This is getting worse by the second.
Well, I know dogs love eating marrow from inside a bone. Are you saying that humans might like eating marrow and they'd like eating human marrow?
Well, that's the inescapable conclusion.
Wow, so it's not just murder, it's cannibalism.
I think it's the best evidence that we've got from the Iron Age of cannibalism. Clearly, if they're actually extracting the marrow from human long bones, then that must be part of some ritual.
Was this definitely ritual cannibalism? It's impossible to be certain. But there's so little evidence to go on, you'd hope at any rate it wasn't particularly widespread. But the bones do offer other clues that could help answer how the victims might have been chosen. Because like some of the bones at Danebury, these remains show signs of disease or deformity.
One of the bones we extracted had Paget's disease, which is a debilitating condition. So are they actually sacrificing not their strong war leaders, but these are the women, the old, the diseased, the crippled, the disabled?
That's very unfortunate. You go in to see the equivalent of a doctor, and he says, well, first I've got to tell you the bad news is you've got Paget's disease. The worst news is that we're going to sacrifice you and eat your marrow.
That's right. Not nice.
It's a distressing thought. Were victims marked out for sacrifice because of disease or deformity?
Unfortunately, there is evidence that could confirm this grim suspicion. At the Verulamium Museum in St Albans, they hold bodies from the burial site of an Iron Age chieftain who died around the same time as the mass sacrifices in Gloucestershire.
But it's not the chief that I'm here to see. It's the 3 women who were buried with him.
Archaeologist Simon West believes the women's bones may show signs of human sacrifice. Or at least what's left of them do.
OK. They seem quite small for human bones, human bodies.
Unfortunately, the ground is so acidic that the survival rate of the bones is, well, the worst one is only 25% of the body.
Ah, OK.
So we haven't got a lot of them.
With so little left, it's hard to be absolutely certain that these poor women were the victims of human sacrifice. But there are other similarities with bodies from other sites, because all 3 had health or disability issues.
This one has a diagnosis of tuberculosis. This one does have an interesting pathology, and that's the styloid process, which is a bone underneath the ear. It's abnormally long.
And what would that do to you?
Well, they sort of connect to the tongue and the throat, so you've got a very sore face and you have problems swallowing.
So we have 4 potential human sacrifice sites. Maiden Castle, St Albans, Danebury, and Gloucestershire. And in 3 of them, it seems that at least some of the victims were chosen because of a debilitating illness or disease.
What we don't know is whether those disabilities or deformities mark them out as different in a good way, special and therefore extra potent to give to the gods, or whether those disabilities or deformities mark them out as odd or wrong as the people saw it, and so they ended up being handy scapegoats.
When the Romans arrived in Britain, they banned human sacrifice, which in itself is a big clue that it really was going on here. As far as they were concerned, it was a barbaric practice that needed stamping out. Job done, you'd think. An ancient and very grisly belief finally quashed. But not quite.
Towards the end of the 4th century, Roman rule started to break down. So what happened then?
Well, here in a museum storeroom at the Hampshire Cultural Trust, there's clear evidence that even after a gap of several hundred years, human sacrifice turned out to be a hard habit for us Brits to break.
He's probably in his later 40s onwards. He's a late Roman skeleton, so he's in a cemetery that was in existence from about 350 to the end of the Roman period.
Yeah.
And he's got some quite interesting evidence for this possible live human sacrifice.
Wow, let's cut straight to the chase. Live human sacrifice. So we're talking about someone being ritually killed?
I believe so, yeah. I think the evidence points that way. There's a very, very fine cut mark
look there.
that runs right across the front of this vertebra. So
that's a cut mark here somewhere?
Yeah, this would have been produced by a blade being drawn across the bone. So this is not like a chopping blow. So this is presumably a knife or other implement being drawn across the front of the neck.
So this man had his throat slit.
So far, so violent. But what marks this man out as being something more than a murder victim is what else was done to him.
He was decapitated, his head was completely removed.
Yeah.
But that was done with chopping blows with an implement from the back of the neck.
So are we talking overkill? That idea where, because you're doing something for ritual purposes, you're not just trying to kill someone, you're trying to kill someone in a particularly theatrical way that pleases the gods or pleases the crowd or whatever.
It may have
you do
been
it loads of different ways.
Exactly, because there are multiple chop marks and cut marks on this individual.
The most famous examples of overkill are found in the numerous bog bodies from across northern Europe, most of which date back to the Iron Age. Just like our chap in Hampshire, they show clear evidence of a ritualised death, sometimes called overkill. And if you think the Hampshire man's wounds are overkill, wait till you see the knife that might have caused them.
I can actually show you a modern reconstruction of one of these blades.
My, what a big knife that is, Katie.
Yes, so this is a specific Roman-type cleaver. It's very, very sharp.
Okay.
Examples have been found quite a lot of places. And it's been suggested that, unlike a modern cleaver, which is basically just designed as a chopping weapon, that these Roman cleavers could be used as a dual-purpose tool. So they would be able to chop, but they'd also be able to precisely slice.
So we have the victim, we have the weapon, but the motive, that remains elusive.
Yeah, I think the motive is something we may never completely be able to tease apart.
Lost in the mists of time.
The uncomfortable truth of all this is that we Brits probably did our fair share of sacrificing humans over hundreds of years. And our belief in it was so strong that not even a so-called civilizing force, aka the Romans, stopped it entirely. Now here's a thought. If it resurfaced once, could it happen again?
I don't know why everyone's so against it.
What, human sacrifice?
Yeah, why not?
Well, you're looking at me with a rather evil eye there. Well, I can think there are obvious reasons why we're against human sacrifice. It's very unkind to the sacrificed person. And any evidence...
Possibly.
If it's just a child or a Vestal Virgin or the equivalent, just be chosen for your purity or availability or the fact you're too small to fight back.
Yeah, that's bad. OK, so we can, like, define our terms.
Yeah.
Some sacrifice, possibly OK. The young and the vulnerable, they're not allowed.
You're forcing the issue here. I'm not saying some of it's OK.
Do you think you'd make a good human sacrifice victim?
Well, I'm not volunteering. I think it may be a bit like warfare. It's the old men who decide who should be sacrificed, and it's the young people who go to an early grave.
I can kind of see you cast as the high priest saying,
Thank you very much.
a human sacrifice is necessary.
And I'll have to choose you. It'll be you, I'm afraid.
Human sacrifice, a brutal practice from ancient Asia, the Pacific, South America.
And Dorset.
According to Mary Ann, in the Iron Age, this part of Britain was a hot spot for human sacrifice. Now we have some peculiar customs, like Morris dancing,